Hi everybody, my name is Keeley and welcome to my reading nook. Today I have a huge book haul for you. I'm a little bit embarrassed at how many books I've bought, but it just happens. I don't know how it happens, it just happens. So I will give a disclaimer that these books were accumulated over time. So I'd probably say over the past like month or two, maybe throughout the summer. So it's not as bad as it looks, but it's still kind of bad. But you know what? Everybody loves a book haul. I love a book haul. I love talking about how excited I am about the books I picked up. And the way that I've divided these is by bookstore. Like I said, I've accumulated them over time. So I'm just going to go through each of the different books that I got at each store and not split it up by genre this time, but I think maybe in the future I'll split it up by genre. I kind of figured it would be easiest to just go by bookstore because, as you'll see, these books cross over most genre lines. There's a little bit of everything here. There's classics, there's thrillers, there's contemporary, there's even some fantasy, so there's a lot going on and I'm excited to get into it. So I figured that I would start off with a bookstore that's in Boston, which is where I live. It's actually right outside of Boston. It's called the Brookline Booksmith and it's absolutely one of my favorite bookstores. They have an incredible used book section in the basement, so if anyone's ever in Boston, highly recommend checking it out. A lot of these books came from that downstairs used section, and that's kind of how the haul started getting out of hand in terms of the size, because you know, you just get into the bargain bin and it's like $5 for a book that you've always wanted to read and you're kind of like, well, I want to read it eventually, so why not get it now? So these are the ones that I got new. The first one, and as you'll see in this haul, I have a lot of classics, and one of my favorite authors for classics is Jane Austen. I'm currently in the middle of reading Sense and Sensibility. That's a little sneak preview of my August wrap-up. But yeah, I love Jane Austen. I just think that she's so funny. I wasn't expecting that out of a classic, and I feel like a lot of people have that same experience where they're a little bit intimidated by the classics, but I'm a huge Jane Austen fan because I just find her hilarious. And I found this book called The Jane Austen Society by Natalie Jenner. And I thought it was just a really cute concept, and I felt like this would be a really fun read for me once the semester picks up. I'm starting school in a couple of weeks, and oh, that's scary. I'm starting school in a couple of weeks, and this book just sounded so fun. It's set after the Second World War, and it's in a British village. And essentially what happens is Jane Austen's estate is kind of falling apart, like it's fallen into disarray, and all of these different people from all these different walks of life kind of come together over their shared passion for Jane Austen to kind of save it. And I don't know, I just thought that that sounded so cute. I love historical fiction, and I love stories of sort of like found family, unlikely friends. Yeah, so that's the Jane Austen Society. The next book that I got new is called It's Up to the Women, and it's actually by Eleanor Roosevelt. The reason I picked it up is because I felt like it would also be a pretty quick read, and I think Eleanor Roosevelt is a super interesting historical figure, and also one of my favorite history writers, Jill Lepore, actually wrote the introduction to this book. So I figured it would be a really fun, inspiring nonfiction to pick up. Again, I'm kind of prepping myself for the semester to get stressful, so I'm prepping myself with books that will make me happy and give me a little bit of escapism throughout the semester. And then next up, and the final book that I bought new, was 100 Years of Solitude by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. I feel like everyone has been picking this up recently. It's a modern classic, and Gabriel Garcia Marquez has won the Nobel Prize in Literature. It's, I believe, for this book. So he's extremely talented, and this story really pulled me in because it's magical realism, and I haven't read something like that in a super long time, but I love that kind of subtle fantasy genre. So in 100 Years of Solitude, it's basically telling the story of the rise and fall of a fake town through the generations of one family. So you follow this family in the different generations, and through them you see what happens to the town. And like I said, there's magical realism, so I think it's going to have some quirky and fun aspects to it. And I don't know, I've heard wonderful things. I've heard a lot of people say that this is one of their favorite books ever, so I'm really excited to pick this one up. And now kind of going into the used books from the Brookline Booksmith. Lots of classics in their used section. So like I said, I'm a big Jane Austen fan, but there are a lot of her novels that I still haven't read. Emma is one of them, so I picked up this copy of Emma. I thought the cover was fun. It's it's like one of the Red Spine Penguin classics. Yeah, so Emma is a lot of people's favorite Austen novel. My current favorite Austen novel is Pride and Prejudice, but I feel like Emma might beat it out. Like, everything that I've heard about it and the things that I know that I love about Austen's writing, which is the humor, I feel like Emma might beat out Pride and Prejudice for that. So I'm super excited to get through this one. I do want to finish Sense and Sensibility first because I'm like getting there and I'm waiting for it to kind of pick up. But yeah, so I picked up Emma by Jane Austen. The other book that I picked up by Jane Austen was Persuasion. And I believe that this was Jane Austen's last novel, and I actually don't know much about this one. It says that Jane Austen uses a love story to explore and gently satirize social pretensions and emotional confusion. Well, I mean, that could have gone on the back of any Jane Austen novel. It says, Persuasion follows the romance of Anne Elliot and naval officer Frederick Wentworth. They were happily engaged until Anne's friend, Lady Russell, persuaded her that Frederick was unworthy. Now, 8 years later, Frederick returns, a wealthy captain in the Navy, while Anne's family teeters on the edge of bankruptcy. They still love each other, but their past mistakes threaten to keep them apart. So that sounds amazing. Yeah, so I'm really excited for both Emma and Persuasion and to add those to my total for the Jane Austen novels that I've read. Now, another classic that's intimidating and, let's be honest, kind of terrifying due to its length and its notoriety, but it's one that I've wanted to get around to for a while, and that is Crime and Punishment by Dostoevsky. Yeah, she's a big book. She's a big book. I have big book fear. I'm scared of her. We're looking at, I mean, certainly, oh, yeah, this edition at least has over 550 pages. This is the Barnes & Noble Classics edition. But like I said, the bargain bin got me at the Brookline Booksmith, and I figured I want to read it one day. Why not just own it, have it in your hands? You'll be more likely to read it. So one day I will read Crime and Punishment. To be honest, I don't fully know the entire plot. Like, all that I know is that the main character commits a crime and sort of spends the whole novel, all 550 pages, wrestling with guilt and wrestling with morality and whether or not the crime was justified, which, I mean, it sounds really intriguing. I'm intimidated by Russian literature as a whole, but I would like to get into it, and I feel like, you know, you'll never know until you try. So that's Crime and Punishment. Another modern classic that I picked up, similar to the era of 100 Years of Solitude, and that is Isabel Allende's The House of the Spirits. Now, this feels really similar to me, similar to 100 Years of Solitude, because it basically follows generations of one singular family, and I think that's really a unique way to tell a story, and I feel like that lends itself well to like a character-driven story, and you'd get really invested, which I love. Hi, this is me while I'm editing this video, and I actually realized that my camera cut out while I talked about two of the books from Brookline Booksmith, so I just wanted to mention those really quick. The first one is Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte, and this is a classic. It's one that I've wanted to have on my list for a really long time. I attempted to read Charlotte Bronte's Jane Eyre, which is Emily Bronte's sister. There's 3 Bronte sisters, kind of a literary feud, which is still a little bit fun. And I didn't love Jane Eyre, so I'm curious to see if I am more of an Emily fan versus a Charlotte. So that's Wuthering Heights. The blurb on the back sounded really fascinating. It says, an unpolished and devastating epic of childhood playmates who grow into soulmates. Ooh. So that's Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. And the second book that I talked about, but my camera decided not to film, that one is Everything I Never Told You by Celeste Ng. And Celeste Ng wrote Little Fires Everywhere, which is one of my favorite books that I've read recently. She really writes super well about family and sibling dynamics, and this specific book is about a family, a Chinese American family in the 1970s in small town Ohio. And they have multiple children, but one of them is their clear favorite, and that's their daughter Lydia. And on the back it says Lydia is dead. So when Lydia dies, the family kind of has to cope with that and realize, what is their family dynamic without Lydia in it. And it seems really interesting. I really liked previous work by Celeste Ng, so I think that this one's going to be a good one. Okay, back to me when I was actually filming this. So the next book that I picked up was Conversations with Friends by Sally Rooney. So I kind of have a love-hate relationship with Sally Rooney because I wasn't the biggest fan of Normal People, which I know is kind of an unpopular opinion, but for me I would just put a content warning on Normal People of sexual violence, and for me I just didn't enjoy reading those parts of the plot. And I would say that she is an incredibly talented author. I really appreciated her ability to really create a very strong character-driven novel, and I was super invested in the plot, super invested in the characters, but for me that content warning kind of detracted from the plot. However, I figured that, since I did enjoy her writing and I did enjoy her ability to create characters that were so multidimensional, I figured it would be worth picking up another one of her books and seeing if I had a better experience the next time around. Conversations with Friends is about a woman named Frances, and she is a cool-headed and darkly observant young woman, vaguely pursuing a career in writing while studying in Dublin. Her best friend is the beautiful and endlessly self-possessed Bobby. At a local poetry performance one night, they meet a well-known photographer, and as the girls are then gradually drawn into her world, Frances is reluctantly impressed by the older woman's sophisticated home and handsome husband, Nick. But however amusing Frances and Nick's flirtation seems at first, it begins to give way to a strange and then painful intimacy. So, it's interesting because I have a sneaking suspicion that this might also include sexual violence, which I wouldn't enjoy. So, I'm gonna give it a go. I think she's 100% so talented, and I would like to have read her work, and I don't want to, cast her aside from my bookshelf without giving her a fair chance. So I plan on reading this and another book that she is either in the process of releasing or already released, which is called Beautiful World, Where Are You, I think. That might also need to join my bookshelves at some point just so that I can continue giving her a chance, because I really do think that if she were to have a novel that didn't have that kind of content warning, or maybe didn't have as much of the plot taken up by that, then I might be able to, get on better with her. But that is Conversations with Friends by Sally Rooney. Now, another book that I picked up, another historical fiction actually, I kind of have a couple historical fictions now, that's The Nightingale by Kristen Hanna. Now this is also a big book. Maybe we're gonna break my big book fear. Ooh, this is even longer than Crime and Punishment, guys. I'm scared. This one's 560 pages. But the story with this one is that it's a historical fiction set in World War II, and it tells the story, I believe it's a split perspective, of two different sisters who are kind of separated throughout the war, and they go on to have, I believe, different lives, and I think it's a lot about them trying to connect again after years of separation and years of just vastly different experiences. I really enjoy historical fiction, specifically from the World War II era. I've noticed that I've actually picked up two in this haul. The Jane Austen Society was also set during the same time. One of my favorite books of all time is All the Light We Cannot See by Anthony Doerr, and that is also a split perspective set during World War II. And so I feel like I'm sure to like this. When I was in high school, I was actually assigned All the Light We Cannot See, and it was on a list of a few other options. And The Nightingale was one of the other options. And so I feel like if I loved All the Light We Cannot See, I will probably love The Nightingale. And I'm excited for it. I might save it for a few months from now, but I'm really interested. And then that was actually all that I got from the Brookline Booksmith. And then quickly I'm just going to move on to two books that I got from Thrift Books. That's a nice hack actually if you guys are looking for a place to get really inexpensive books. Thrift Books is a website that allows you to kind of get books for much cheaper than they normally would be. I personally find it to be a lifesaver when there's a book that's been out for a while and I know I could get cheap, but I don't necessarily have the time to like dig through thrift stores, you know, in my own free time. You could just go on thrift books and support thrift stores and support other places that sell used books, but also get a book for a really fair price. So the first one that I got was actually Throne of Glass by J Maas. And this is, I mentioned this in my August TBR, but I read in August, it was on my August TBR, but I finished it at the time that I'm filming this, and that was The Assassin's Blade by J Maas. The Assassin's Blade was the prequel to Throne of Glass in the Throne of Glass series, which I believe has 9 books. It's a very YA fantasy series, where you follow one protagonist named Selena Sardathian, and you basically follow her throughout all of these books as she goes about life as an assassin. It's really interesting. It's kind of fun. My good friend Abby from home actually recommended it to me to help me get out of a reading slump, specifically a reading slump where I couldn't really get myself into fiction and I was only reading nonfiction. So she figured that something fast-paced and YA like this would really help me out of that slump, and it definitely did. So I ordered this book from Thrift Books after I finished The Assassin's Blade, and I'm really looking forward to getting to these and the following books in the series. It says, the little blurb on the back is, 2 men love her. The whole land fears her. Only she can save them all. So it's very much like YA fantasy, fun, fast-paced, epic adventure. So I'm excited for it. And yeah, we'll see where that takes me. And the second and final book that I got from Thrift Books was Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine by Gail Honeyman. Now, I picked this one up because a booktuber that I watch pretty frequently, Kira Foster, she was raving about this in a vlog a while ago and said that it was one of her favorites, and it just seemed like kind of fun. It says that, the back of it says, no one's ever told Eleanor that life should be better than fine. Meet Eleanor Oliphant. She struggles with appropriate social skills and tends to say exactly what she's thinking. Nothing is missing in her carefully timetabled life, where weekends mostly consist of frozen pizza, vodka, and phone chats with mummy. So it kind of just seems like somebody who is like a little bit stagnant in life, but there's a little bit of a romance plot that kicks her out of her rut. And it just seems like a fun one. It's also got the Reese's Book Club sticker on there, and I've enjoyed, which is Reese Witherspoon's book club that she like runs via Instagram. And I've loved every pick that I've read off of her list. Little Fires Everywhere is one of them. So yeah, I'm pretty excited for this one. And that is Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine. Now, moving on to the pile of books that I got most recently. I went over this past weekend on a little road trip to Vermont, which was so fun, and I ended up stopping in Burlington and stopping by 2 of my favorite bookstores there. One I visited for the first time on this trip and really enjoyed, and the other one is a repeat visit from a previous trip that I just had to go back for more. And the first one, the repeat visit, oh my goodness, okay, I'm gonna put them all over here. The repeat visit is Crow Bookshop, and like I said, these are both in Burlington, Vermont. So from Crow, I picked up a few really fun finds, and the first is more of a thriller horror. I've been feeling really excited for the fall season. I know some people are gonna be like, please let us have every last bit of summer, but I am just one of those people that as soon as September comes calling, I want it to be, you know, the fall season, the spooky season, Halloween time, and I really like when the weather is colder. So I'm just one of those weird people that likes the summer to go away. Yeah, so the first book that I picked up is Shirley Jackson's The Haunting of Hill House. Now, I am excited for this one. I adored the Netflix series that was adapted from this. I thought it was super well done, and I highly recommend going to see it or watching it on your own. It's not like they are airing Netflix shows in theaters. You can't go to see it. But I believe actually that the Netflix series adapted this and kind of changed it. So I actually think that reading the book is going to be different than the series. And I'm really excited for that. The little blurb on the back Also, this is the Penguin Classics edition, which I love those with the black spine. I just think they're so sleek looking. So the quote on the back that's from inside the novel says, "Hill House, not sane, stood by itself against its hills, holding darkness within." So I'm certainly looking forward to reading this in October. I think I'm going to make a video all about the Halloween type spookier books that I'm going to be reading, and I might just incorporate that with my October TBR, but this is definitely on it. Now, the next one is actually a little bit of a shift. Sorry, let me move my crazy pile of books. It's a little bit of a shift from the horror, and this is Letters to a Young Poet by Rilke. Another booktuber that I subscribe to, her name's Emma. I can't remember what her channel name is. I think it's Emmy. She loves Rilke, and Letters to a Young Poet is extremely short, and I found this copy in Crow Bookshop, and I really enjoyed the cover design. It says that the cover was designed by Daniel Pelevin. Good job, Daniel. So basically the story behind this is Rilke is a poet, and he wrote these letters to a young boy who attended the same military school that he did. And the boy is asking him for advice about his poetry. He's kind of saying like, am I any good? Like, please give me advice. And Rilke writes him back these letters over several years. And it says that Rilke wrote him these 10 letters. Someone says that they are the vibrant and deeply felt experiences of life. And so, yeah, I've heard that it's very highlightable, very quotable, very beautiful prose that kind of just makes you feel inspired and makes you believe in art. And so, yeah, I figured that that would be a really fun addition to my bookshelf, and, you know, something that you can just easily read in a day. It's about 100 pages. Yeah, so I figured that would be a fun little lighthearted read. Now, the next book kind of continues on in the horror scary book realm. That is Stephen King's Misery. Now, I have never read any Stephen King. Actually, that's a lie. I started it years ago and never finished it. So I've DNF'd one Stephen King, but I feel like it is kind of a scary one to use as your first King. It's like 1,100 pages. So I felt like I needed to kind of take a step back, find one that was a little bit more manageable for a first timer, such as myself. And this plot sounds fascinating. Basically, there's a best-selling novelist who gets kidnapped by his #1 fan because she's really upset about like the kind of ending that he gave his character in a series that she's absolutely obsessed with. And if anyone gets this reference, this book is essentially the plot of that one iCarly episode where they get kidnapped by their #1 fan and they're like forced to do live shows in her basement. I'm sure that's sort of Stephen King light, but I'm really intrigued to like actually fully complete a Stephen King book, and the plot of this one just seemed the most interesting out of the ones that they had in the store. So I'm excited for that. I'm also going to be reading this during October. Now, let's see. So the next one from Crow Bookshop was Virginia Woolf's To the Lighthouse. I'm incredibly excited about this one. I don't fully know what this one is about, but it's basically just about like the daily life of a British family while they stay, I think, in an oceanside home. I love Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf, and so I've been looking to get my hands on another novel of hers, and To the Lighthouse was pretty brief. I might even try to get to it in August before the semester begins, just because it's kind of like summery. It is, you know, it's lighthouses, it's people living by the beach, so I think that this one's going to be interesting, and it was a nice used copy. Also, I love the bookmarks that they give you at Crow Bookshop. I don't even know if it's focusing, but I really like them. Now, the last book that I got from Crow was, you know, and this one's pretty popular and also pretty much a big book. This is The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, now by V.E. Schwab. This one has been popular for quite a while. I believe it kind of had a second wind on Book Talk, and a lot of young people were buying it, and a lot of people are saying that this is the kind of book that's going to be considered a classic in and of itself in the future. And that is super exciting to me, to kind of like have read it earlier on before it becomes, you know, heralded amongst the classics. You know, who knows if that'll happen and what does it even mean to be a classic, but I think that's kind of an interesting description of a book that I haven't really heard of modern books in a while. The thing on the back says, "A life no one will remember, a story you will never forget." So I think the cover is really nice, and it's essentially the story of a woman named Addie LaRue who makes a deal with the devil, I believe just to have like, I think it's just to have like freedom in her life. And essentially it goes wrong and the devil neglects to mention that every time that she is speaking to someone, if they turn away from her, they'll forget her. They won't know who she is. So nobody can form memories about her. And so she goes through this extremely long life, kind of living this very strange, invisible life. And it's set in Paris in the 1700s. So that's kind of a fascinating era and kind of a fascinating concept. So I'm really excited for that. And those books close out the ones from Crow Bookshop. Now, the final place that I went to, I promise, is, it is called Phoenix Books. I was like, I know it's another bird. So, Phoenix Books. And the first book that I got from there, actually coincidentally, is called Letters to a Young Scientist. And this is by Edward O. Olson, who is a very famous biologist. And it's kind of a riff on Rilke's Letters to a Young Poet. And it's supposed to be, you know, letters of advice to young scientists. And I study environmental policy, like in the environmental science side of things. And so I figured this would be a fun read and something to maybe inspire me when school gets tough this semester. Now, the next one is, oh my gosh, this next one is so nice, guys. Everyone just pause. Like, just pause, take a deep breath, like, this book is so beautiful. This is a new edition. Backstory, one of my favorite classics ever is The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. I love that book so much, and I gave away my copy to a friend for her birthday. And so I was kind of like, maybe I should get a new copy just because I would love to have one on my shelves. And I found this edition in Phoenix Books in Burlington, Vermont. It is the Chiltern Publishing Edition. Look at that. Oh my god. I can't tell if it's focusing, but like, I really hope that it is. It's like these flowers that are lifted off the page, like almost like bubble paint. And it's this black with the gold sprayed edges on the side. And the font, guys, okay, it's like this glossy paper. I don't know if you can see. Yeah, it's the glossy paper and the font is just perfect. And oh my god, I'm just so excited to have a copy of The Picture of Dorian Gray on my shelf because it's one of my favorites, and especially such a beautiful edition like this one. Yeah, I feel really glad that I found this, and I feel like the style of it like really represents the story of Dorian Gray really well, because it's like so beautiful on the outside, and then we'll have to see the story that is inside. But I highly recommend picking up Picture of Dorian Gray if you have not already, because it's just such a fun story. Okay, now the next book that I got from Phoenix Books is an Agatha Christie novel. Can you tell that I was feeling spooky? I really wanted to kind of build up my October TBR, even though I have a ton of books on my shelves already. But this is Agatha Christie's And Then There Were None. The other one that I really wanted to pick up from her was Murder on the Orient Express, but this is the one that they had in the store, and this is actually the one that I've heard the best reviews about, so I'm really excited. It essentially is the story of 10 strangers who are lured to an isolated island mansion off the Devon coast by a mysterious UN Owen. At dinner, a recorded message accuses each of them in turn of having a guilty secret, and by the end of the night, one of the guests is dead, stranded by a violent storm and haunted by a nursery rhyme counting down one by one, as one by one they begin to die. Which among them is the killer, and will any of them survive? Ooh, I mean, that's perfect for Halloween time. So I'm really excited for that. Now, the next one that I got from Phoenix Books is David Sedaris's Barrel Fever. So, I'm a huge fan of David Sedaris. I loved Me Talk Pretty One Day. I loved Calypso. I have like a ton of his collections on my shelf. But this is another of his essay collections. Basically he just writes really dry, kind of funny essays, and I'm just a big fan of his style. So I would recommend checking out, like, I would kind of call them like short story memoir type essays. And they're super fun, so I'd highly recommend checking them out. I started with Me Talk Pretty one day, that's a great one. But any of them are great, so I would highly recommend. And this was just one that I realized I didn't have yet. Now, the last book, we've gotten to the final book of the entire haul. Congratulations, you made it. Clap for yourself. Wow. So proud of you. Yeah, so this is the last book that I got, and it's actually one that I'm like really excited to read potentially in September. So I'm glad that I ended on one that I think actually might come up soon in my TBR list. And that is The House in the Cerulean Sea by TJ Klune. I am so excited for this book. I've heard so many people give it 5 stars. It's basically a lot about found family. The setting is very like jagged cliffs, like, you know, oceanside area, the Cerulean Sea. This is what it says. Linus Baker is a by-the-book caseworker in the department in charge of magical youth. Oh, I forgot to mention this is like magical realism. At 40, he lives in a tiny house with a devious cat and his old records for company, but his quiet life is about to change. Linus is summoned by extremely upper management and given a curious and highly classified assignment. Travel to an orphanage on a distant island and determine whether 6 dangerous magical children are so dangerous, in fact, that they're likely to bring about the end of days. So it seems to be that he visits the House in the Cerulean Sea, which is this orphanage for magical children, and chaos ensues. But I've just heard like beautiful things about it. I heard it really warms your heart. I also heard that there's an LGBTQIA plus romance in here, which is sweet, and I'd love to see that, especially in like other genres. Like this being magical realism, I feel like is fun because I think, you know, we started to see a lot of LGBTQIA plus romances in like contemporary fiction, but like I hadn't actually read any on my own that had bled into other genres. Like, you know, I'd like to see some in maybe horror, thriller, you know, this is fun, magical realism, maybe some in fantasy. So yeah, I'm really excited for this. I've heard amazing things, and I just think it's apparently like a very atmospheric read, which I love. And yeah, that is the final book. I got it from Phoenix Books in Burlington, Vermont. And that was it. So we had quite a few classics, quite a few historical fictions, contemporary fictions, horror, thrillers, you know, poetry. We had essays, we had funny stories, we had fantasy. I mean, we had it all. So thank you guys so much for, you know, sitting with me all the way here. Thank you so much for sitting with me in my reading nook and coming by. I hope to talk to each of you in the comments and let me know if you've had any fun book hauls recently and if you're kind of in the mood to stock up on some new books before the fall. I don't know why, but it kind of gets me in that mood. Yeah, so this was a ton of fun, and I really hope that you enjoyed it. I hope you got some recommendations from it. Yeah, thanks for coming to my reading nook, and bye!